Chapter 16 is about social change. What does that mean? Social change means that the world changes, our life changes, our culture changes, our nations change, we change, everybody changes. Change is the only constant. That's a contradiction of terms, of course, but it is a meaningful and a true one. The only thing that's certain is change. There's change in everything. Change in the environment, change in the culture, change in how we live, change in societies. Well, what causes social change? Well, a lot of things do. For example, inventions cause change. Technology causes change. Industrialization causes change. Urbanization causes change. It is a direct result of industrialization and the growth of technology, which issues from invention. Also, discovery produces change. Discovery in space, discovery around the world, discovery of new plants and species, discovery of new materials, inventions and discovery. Then there's another thing called the diffusion of ideas and of knowledge. And that diffusion occurs constantly, and with the invention of television and radio and improvements in transportation, people communicate with each other at such a ferocious pace nowadays. Now, when that occurs, ideas get spread all around, and that produces more and more change. People have thought about different patterns of change. Some changes are extremely important, others aren't so important. For example, no one knew the impact of the computer on the world. There was a film made back in the 1990s and the 20th century called 2001, and it was about a computer named HAL, which took over a planetary exploration with astonishing tragic results. A thinking computer. But the person who wrote that book and that film made of it, called Space Odyssey, 2001. Those people believed that computers could become extremely powerful, almost as powerful as human beings, and perhaps even more powerful someday. Now that's a bewildering and terrifying thought, and it may not be true, but the point made is that computers can do a lot of things, and we have learned what they can do. Who, for example, would have thought that there could have been such a thing as a cell phone many years ago? Who could have thought that there was a term called a texting? No one heard of texting 10 years ago, but now kids in elementary school text. And these are new changes, and they are changes, some of which are important, and others which are just fads, and that may not last long. But the important thing is change, and some of the patterns of change are really, really, really very important, like population growth, like the growth of cities, and of their impact on the environment. Those are all very important relationships. Now, there are some folks who said that the world becoming modern as a result of industrialization, it's called modernity, that modernity is a bad thing. And there was a German fellow named Ferdinand Tönnies, T-O-N-N-I-E-S, pronounced Tönnies in German, that Ferdinand Tönnies said, "Oh, all this change is not good. People are losing their sense of community. People pass each other in the street without even knowing each other in cities, whereas in the countryside, you know everybody in your town or your village. But nowadays, it's hard to know everybody because there's so many people and they're strangers to each other in the street." I remember moving to New York City when I was working on my doctorate down at Columbia University, and I came from a very small town. And I can remember the shock of watching people indifferent to a person, a handicapped person, who needed assistance crossing a road, or needed assistance going up some subway stairs, just walking past them and ignoring them. In my town, someone fell down in the street. You picked them up. You couldn't walk past them. So as Turney said, cities are not good places. They do bad things to people. On the other hand, the terms that he used to describe the wonderful village life of the past, he called that Gemeinschaft, meaning togetherness. And he called the separateness of the city, he called that Gesellschaft. And those two terms are German terms, but they're part of the vocabulary of anthropologists, no matter whether they're Japanese or Polish or Latin American. They're universal terms, Gemeinschaft and Gesellschaft. Gesellschaft has to do with cities, city life, and the strangers in the city. And Gemeinschaft has to do with the village, where you know everybody. You also should know that there are other views of modernity, that some people believe that there is hope in the cities for the quality of life, the quality of social life in the cities. For example, Max Weber says that rationality issues from the life of a city and from urban life and from industrialization, and you remember his view of bureaucracy, that it helped to organize things so that we're not relying entirely on ferocious emotions that might lead to conflict and war. Emile Durkheim, the French sociologist, Durkheim said that there is such a thing as organic solidarity in the city. He said that people, though they live, they do different things. They run shops, run streetcars, drive automobiles, run computers. Even though they have specialized jobs, he says there are interconnected elements with all of these specializations, and he called that organic. He said those connections are very real and people know about them, and they regard them as very real and behave accordingly. So that compensates in a way for the fragmentation and the isolation of having specialized jobs. There are very real connections. The internet, for example, brings people together. It's an astonishing invention, even though people are separate and apart. That's what he meant by organic solidarity. Social change, it's a constant. It's always with us, and quite predictable. Not all social changes are wonderful. Some are horrendous. For example, the invention of the hydrogen bomb. It terrifies everybody. It's one of the central preoccupations of Barack Obama, is trying to figure out what to do with them, and also what to do with the Russian possession of them, and the Chinese, and the Pakistani, and the Indians, and to stop the proliferation for fear that one might go off and obliterate a city like Mexico City or New York City or London. How awful that would be, with millions of people dead. So, some things are not always good. On the other hand, we may someday figure out how to produce power by fusion instead of by fission. And nuclear fusion would be radioactive free, and that would make cheap energy available to the poorest country. How wonderful that would be, but that's probably 100 years old. And it depends a lot on machines like the super colliders that the Swiss and the French have built, and looking at subatomic particles and how to manage them and control them. And nuclear fusion may be the future. Right now we know that carbon emissions cause another disaster, and that is called global warming. That warming has caused a chunk of Greenland up north, that's a big island country, now independent, big chunk of it to break off, and it's they think 6 times the size of the island of Manhattan. Boy, that's a big chunk of ice. It'll take a long time for it to melt as it drifts southward. into warmer water. But that's an illustration of global warming. Another one is the problem of the disappearing polar bears who require a lot of ice. The ice is shrinking. And it's thought that maybe within 20 or 30 years that North Sea, the Arctic Ocean, may be ice-free a good part of the year. And if it is, that means ships could sail around the north, which they presently can't do without icebreakers. Global warming is a reality, and what the consequences of it could be most severe. They affect weather patterns. Russia, for example, this year had awful fires, which were not in their past, and generated by continuous heat and hot temperatures that they are unaccustomed to. Though the changes appear to be small, accumulated over a long period of time, and gradually they go up. So global warming is something that we fear. And that's a catastrophe in terms of change, and we have to figure out how to deal with it. Lake Champlain, that extends the entire border of western Vermont, Lake Champlain is polluted. The fish have chemicals in them. You have to be careful how many you eat if you catch them. Some of those chemicals are generated by industrialization, and that's one of the elements of social change associated with modernity. We have to control the emissions of industrial plants. We have to control the sewage produced by having cows that are important to Vermont. That all of that fecal matter accumulated from big farms drains into Lake Champlain, and it raises the level of the phosphates in the lake. So there are beaches that are closed because of the growth of Spirogyra algae stimulated by the phosphates in the water. Mallett's Bay, for example, has a lot of green stuff in it. So do a lot of the other harbors and basins along the lake. These are immediate problems that are visible, that are a direct result of social changes, which can be catastrophic. But they can be solved. We can find solutions to them, but you have to be aware of them and what's causing them. I hope that these last two chapters have significance and meaning for you, because they point to things that you folks in college now are going to have to solve in the future to improve the quality of life of human beings, to improve the quality of your own lives and those of your children. I look forward to discussing this chapter about social change with you.